Welcome to this week's Pascal's China Lens. We're going to talk about the CAI, the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment between China and Europe that was signed just 6 weeks ago. Very interesting to see how Europe and China are going to deal together when it comes to economy and investment and trade. So what is this Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, or CAI or CAI, all about? The agreement that was signed on the 30th of December last year, 2020, between Europe and China. It took 7 years to negotiate it, to discuss. There's 35 rounds of negotiations they had over 7 years' time. Specifically, last 18 months were extremely intense. It's signed, now it needs to get through the European Council, which will be the same people that agreed on this agreement pretty much, so that should be okay. And then next year, 2021, it needs to be ratified, which means that the European Parliament needs to agree on it, and that is the moment where the deal can actually become effective. That is still a big question if that's going to happen. Now, what's this deal all about? I mean, there's lots of things in this deal, but I've reduced it to 3 main topics, which I think are critical. One is about market access, the other one is about fairness, so a fair level playing field, and the last one is about value, specifically when it comes to human rights and sustainable development. Now, if we look at the first one, market entry, that was something in 2013 when the European Union and China started negotiating that they really wanted. I mean, Europe is open to do business with, and so China is not. And so this is not fair. And so China needed to open its markets, being the biggest complaints of European companies, specifically in industries like telecommunication, like finance industry, healthcare, and so on. And all of these markets now with this deal are getting opened. But also markets like electrical vehicles, which is 50% of the world market is in China. And then even markets like biotech, they're not opening up completely, but it's starting. And a lot of business services. Think about real estate, transportation, things about market research, and all these things that is like soft services towards China. Specifically when it comes to telecom and cloud and data, I think that will be very interesting. And also the finance world coming to China. European companies being able to do business in China without needing a 50% partner and having no other conditions. But let's not forget, the Chinese market is a really tough market, even if it's completely open. Now, the second thing is about a fair level playing field. I mean, one of the problems is that European companies have been complaining about technology transfers that were forced, about SOE, state-owned enterprises in China getting subsidies and basically tenders not being fair. Well, all that is part of that agreement. And it means that now China needs to have more transparency, needs to tell what they're subsidizing, how the tenders are creating, and create a more level playing field so European companies are not forced to actually give their technology in exchange for market, but also they can participate in tenders and win them from even Chinese local players, which was sometimes difficult. Most important is that this is being discussed, or that will be reviewed regularly at the top level. The VPs of China and the EU, Vice President, Vice Premier, will discuss at the top level regularly how this is going and what the progress is. And that's a major change and major advancement. The other thing is about sustainable development. Of course, the UN Sustainable Development Goals is what China and Europe wants. It's about poverty alleviation, which China is doing really great. It's about things like energy and sustainable resources and renewable energy. All these things China is doing great already, but China needs to do more, specifically when it's about labor, forced labor, about human rights, and that's what's put in this agreement, that the European Union expects China to take care of these values and to pay attention and to have a discussion about it. Now, of course, there's a lot of debate on, is this really going to happen? Now, is this a good deal or not? My personal opinion is that this is a deal that Europe really needs. And the reason is that China is a market which we cannot not look at anymore. It's the biggest trading partner of Europe. But it's not just about trades. I think the deal reached its objectives of 2013. So this deal, according to what was the objective, is actually quite well. The other thing, after 7 years, you can't keep negotiating. Maybe you get to a new deal later, you start a new negotiation, but let's end this and get the best out of it, what we have now. It will give Europe more autonomy, specifically towards the US, which I also think is very needed in this world. But everything that is signed in this deal is also going to be good for the world, because this is going to be the minimum standard for the rest of the world and every country to do business with China with. I think specifically China having more transparency will be very interesting to watch, because if that is really a situation where we will actually be able to see what China is doing and then discuss that at the highest levels, it's going to be good, I believe, for both parties. But there's a lot of critics. And a lot of people say China rushed this deal, it lacks enforcements, it's also just a few new concessions that China did, which they already did last year or the year before. It doesn't really help small companies, and it opens the gate for massive Chinese investments into Europe. And so this is not good. So a lot of people are saying this deal is really bad. Now, I'm going to talk about these 5 things very quickly. The first thing, which is really about that we should have waited for Biden's administration, and Jake Sullivan said it very clearly to the European Union, you should really wait because we need to be together into this against China. And that's the position of the US today. I disagree, because I believe that if we would have waited, if we would wait for Biden's administration, we would never sign a deal. On the other hand, the US didn't wait for us to do a deal with China on trade and investment before. So why should we wait for them? I don't agree on that. The second thing is about human rights. And there I do believe that it's quite important that this is put into this agreement. Now, what we don't realize is that this is almost nowhere in no agreements internationally being put into. So the fact that this is not being enforceable is of course a good point. But the question is, can we force China to change its human rights as part of an investment agreement? I'm not sure. The big challenge on human rights, in my view, between China and the US is that we in the West, we want China to take action before they can gain our respect and our trust. China wants our trust and respect before they take action. And so we're talking against each other. This deal could actually bootstrap this, or this bottleneck could go away a little bit, because with this deal, I do believe we are gaining some respect. Of course, the way towards human rights improvement in China is still a long way, but maybe this could actually change something. It's not a lot, but it's better than nothing in my view. The third thing is really about that China did only concessions they already did before, and I agree. I mean, a lot of this in this deal are concessions in industries like telecommunications, specifically fintech, electrical vehicles, they did in the last years already. But on the other hand, whatever it's in there, it's also good for the rest of the world. And they can't take it out anymore once there's an agreement. The fourth thing is really about Germany and France and the big companies in Europe that benefit from this deal much more than the small companies, the SMEs. And there I think it's correct. I think the big companies, the big multinationals, they really benefit a lot more from this deal than these SMEs. But we should not forget that they're opening the gate for us to then later on be part of it. And also there's a lot of SMEs supplying to, let's say, the car manufacturers in Germany. And if Germany has better market in China with their vehicles, actually it also indirectly helps the small companies. Now the last thing is really about international protection. And a lot of people say this is now opening the gate for investment into Europe by Chinese, and they'll buy everything from us, all our technology. Well, I think there's a few things we need to think about. First of all, this international protection is actually a deal that is signed bilaterally by 26 out of 27 countries in Europe. Having a global European international protection agreement is something that Europe is working on and will take some time to get there, but this is separate from this CAI. So it will happen, but it will take time. Let's not put it in there because otherwise we're blocking something else. And there's already protection. On the other hand, China is blocking the investment towards Europe itself because they want to keep the capital within the country. So I don't see this as a big issue. But a lot of people are talking that it should be part of it. But I don't think this is the main issue. I think human rights is probably the main debate that we still need to talk about. Now, this deal, good or bad, there's critics, there's pro. I think Europe just needed a deal like that to get towards that market that has become so big that we can't avoid anymore. Now, looking at it from the year of the ox, it's 2021. It's the year where we will gonna work really hard. And this agreement, in my view, is only the starting point. In China, you first have to create some agreement and then you have to do the work afterwards, not beforehand. And so the ox will do all the work. Or like they say in Chinese, the Chinese word is 恭喜发财, and 恭喜发财 actually means I wish you a lot of wealth. And interesting enough, the last word, cai, C-A-I, actually means wealth. And that's the same acronym as this deal. Is this a good deal? Is this a bad deal? Many people have an almost binary opinion on it. I think it was a needed deal. Europe really needed it. And I do believe that if we put in the work in the next years to come, the work that the ox will do, then I do believe that we will make something really different for Europe moving forward. Let's not forget, it's the biggest market that Europe is dealing with. There's a lot of opportunities. Of course, there's a lot of challenges as well, but we need to move on. Hope you liked it, and see you next week for another episode on Pascal's China Lens.